So, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Um, so for some of us in the room today, this might be your favorite time of year. There's joy, there's laughter, there's family, there's presents. And for some of us here today, it might feel like it's simply a season to endure, to get through while counting the days until spring. So for some of us, it is the joy and the laughter. And for other of us, we might associate this type of year with some of the pain and grief of the loss of loved ones. And so it all can kind of be wrapped into this one big ball of both and. But I think that is precisely why this time of year for me is so beautiful. Because if we mistakenly think that beauty is only found in the superficial, pretty, happy lives, it becomes a bit of a deceit and we don't resonate with it. Because beauty is so much more when we encompass the whole, the all of who we are. When we encompass the good and the bad, the ugly and the joy, the love and the laughter, and the grief and the loss, when it all comes together as one, that's where that's where the authenticity comes from. And I think that's where the magic can happen, right? Because if you, this time of year, and I mentioned this last week, if we look out at the dark sky and the full bright moon, I can't help but have a feeling, a sense of awe and wonder, and that the vastness of everything that is seen and unseen in a universe that we are a part of, that we can barely even begin to comprehend in our finite minds. And we don't get that unless we have the lights off, unless we can see the darkness, right? It's through the darkness that we can see the light. And so I think of this time of year as very sacred. It's like I said last week, it's a time to slow down, a time to go within and embrace the vastness and the mystery and the beauty of the dark. And it's a busy time. And there are parties and there are shopping and there's preparing for traveling. And so we have we have both. And so maybe for some of us in this room, maybe this time of year used to be happy. And then life intervened, and now there's a sense of loneliness or grief, and it's harder to put on a happy face. But I'm here to remind us today that there is light in the dark, there is light in the shadows, and the cold nights contrasted with the warmth of the fire. And it all can wrap itself into one big ball of experiential dichotomy. I don't even know if that's a phrase, but I kind of like it, right? Experiential dichotomy, the beauty and the darkness, the sacredness in the silence, the holiness in the flowers and the leaves that have just died and fallen to the ground. And so last week, I talked about slowing down, I talked about resting. And I want to expand on that just a little bit more because I want to point out that there is a difference between sleeping and resting. And sometimes I've had people in my life that say, I'm so exhausted, but I'm getting all the sleep that I need. But I want to point out that sleeping does not always bring rest, because sleeping and true rest are two very different things. So if you find yourself sleeping more and still not feeling renewed, perhaps it is not the physical rest that is needed, but the mental, emotional, or spiritual slowing down that your soul is yearning for. So, how do we do this? How do we actually rest our souls? Well, maybe one way that we can begin to allow our soul to rest is allowing it to stop having to be superficial, right? Maybe we can rest by not trying to have to put on a happy face or a mask. We rest our souls by letting our guard down, even if very briefly. We can rest our soul by releasing the facade that we are hiding behind and showing the world and allowing our deepest inner being to shine forth and surface. We can rest our souls by making the time to take that mask off, if only for ourselves occasionally, because it requires so much energy to keep up our appearances. I want to say this, and I'm going to say it and then I'm going to repeat it. It takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to hide who we really are deep inside. It takes emotional and mental energy to hide who we really are deep inside. And then sometimes we hide ourselves so deeply that we forget who we are and wonder where that little divine spark went. And then what happens is the hiding place becomes permanent, and then we get lost, and then we get exhausted, and as a result, we stop looking for that little pilot light inside of us that actually never ever goes out. But we can forget that it's there. And I understand why we do this, because sometimes there are times in our lives that we fear. We fear that if we let our guard down, if only for a moment, the tears will come flooding in. And if we allow ourselves to feel what we are so deeply pushing down and the tears start, they may never stop. And so we just don't go there. But I'm here to say, I've never met a person who started crying and never stopped, right? Because crying, grieving is part of the human experience. It's part of who we are as human beings. But so is loving and laughing and smiling again. And so many times it is all wrapped up together in one big messy ball of human experience. Hence the phrase laughing through our tears, right? I mean, I'm sure many of us have experienced that our deepest laughter sometimes comes in the middle of our deepest crying. When we are grieving so hard and then somebody that we love says something and kind of breaks that spell, and then we start laughing, and then we start crying again, and then we start laughing. And that's okay. That's what we are allowed, meant, supposed to do as human beings. So slowing down, turning it off, listening to that inner voice is how we rest. The darkness serves a purpose. The silence serves a purpose. It allows us to get in touch with that inner place where we don't normally go on our own. But it is that dark inner place that has become a stranger to us that is so important that we begin to get to know again. Because that's the place where we find our humanity. That's the place where we are reminded that we're real. It's that place deep inside us that reminds us that we're alive. We can't, or maybe I will say, shouldn't, try to live our entire lives on the surface of who we are meant to be, because that only creates a shell of a life. And I've told this story before throughout the years, but a few years ago, we had a kitten. We don't have any kittens now, they're all cats. But a few years ago, the kitten in the Jones household, in her exuberant joy, did a flying acrobatic leap right for our newly decorated Christmas tree, and it all went crashing down. And in the midst of that, the glass shards and the broken ornaments and the downed tree was a kitten who had found a ball of yarn. And all was well with the world, because what can possibly go wrong or be wrong if you are a kitten and in the chaos of the world crashing around you, you come up with a ball of yarn? There is no greater joy. Because life is all encompassing. It just is. And we run into problems when we try to pretend that it should all be kittens and puppy dogs. It's not kittens and puppy dogs all the time. It's also crashing Christmas trees and shards of glass. And it's also kittens coming up with that ball of yarn. We run into problems, though, in the opposite way if we only think of this time of year as the downed Christmas tree and the shards of glass. And while those glass pieces may cut us, they also glitter and they reflect the light in really beautiful ways. And we had a beloved congregant who passed away a few years ago. His name was Ernie, and he sent me a little saying about Kuntsugi, and I talk about this every year, and I'm probably not saying it right. So, but the concept of Kuntsugi is if a piece of pottery or ceramic has a crack, a repair can be made. The artist fills the crack with the material that includes gold, silver, or platinum dust. And as a result, the repaired piece is worth far more than the original. This is termed kuntsugi in Japanese. Does somebody want to pronounce? Am I doing that okay? Okay. Um, so some therapists have taken note of this and adapted it to people with cracks or who feel like they're broken by trauma. That the trauma happens, but we can put it back together. We can become a complete person. And sometimes we become stronger and more beautiful and shinier than who we were before. Because then we have some of our own personal gold, silver, or platinum that has become part of who we are in the process. And so when I think about this time of the year and what it means for us, and our theme for December is choosing hope. And that's what Maya talked about with the kids. Hope can be an action. Choosing hope is an action. Choosing to live with hope does not mean that we ignore the pain or the loss or the grief or the cracks in our lives. It means that we acknowledge it, we embrace it, and then we choose to bring all of it together with the laughter and the joy and the love and the compassion and the family and the friends and the community that can hold us up and help us be stronger. Because we all of us, have things and people in our lives who are worth standing up and being who we need to be for. And if you think about it, for me, this is where the awe and the wonder comes in of how beautiful all of this really, really is. I have a chaplain friend um, named Edie, and she was telling us a few years ago about this time of year was really, really hard for her because, she had a stepson who had died in early December. And yet, this time of year was also her favorite time of year. And she would always make snowflakes for her family. And it was like their thing that they would do together as a family. They would make snowflakes. And then a few years later, her daughter was diagnosed with cancer and died at the end of the month. And so there were a few years when she just didn't want to make snowflakes. She just couldn't. She'd lost a son at this time of year, she'd lost a daughter at this time of year. And even though this was her favorite time of year, she couldn't feel the joy. And then she was telling our chaplaincy class a few years ago, during this time of year, she said, I had a dream. And her daughter came to her in her dream, and her son, her other son, who was still alive, had just gotten engaged. And her daughter came to her in the dream and said, Mom, make the snowflakes. Shannon needs a snowflake. It's both, right? Edie was never gonna not feel the pain of losing a son and a daughter at this time of year. But her whole life before that had been wrapped in the joy of creating the snowflakes that represented the joy and the laughter and the love at this time of year. And it took her a while, but she started making snowflakes again. And that, to me, I think is what it means to genuinely and authentically choose hope. When we choose hope, we're not denying the pain. We're not ignoring the grief or the loss. We're not betraying the people in our lives who might no longer be with us. We are just adding on and including the other side of what it means to be alive. We're including the happiness and the laughter and the peace and the love. It doesn't have to be an either or. This time of year does not have to be either or. It can be both and. And that's what we try to do here on a regular basis, right? We come together as this community and we laugh and we sing and we have beautiful music. But hopefully, we also create the space where we can come and we can cry and we can let our guard down and we can not be strong and perfect and still feel like we're being held up. And then when we are being held up and then we feel like we're at a place that we can be strong again, then we get to hold somebody else up. And it goes around and around. And sometimes we're the strong ones, and sometimes we're the ones that are reaching out. Like I said last week, from you I receive, to you I give. It's reciprocal, it goes back and forth. And so I just hope this gives us something to think about this month, this season, that the darkness is vast, The light is beautiful. The joy is real. The grief is here. And it's all together. And that's okay. We don't have to erase one to experience the other. And I we had a chaplain that recently got certified, and in his chaplaincy paper, this is what he wrote. I really liked it. He wrote, "Life is like a book. Some chapters are happy, some are sad, and some are life changing. But if I don't turn the page, I will never know what the next chapter holds." So, with that, let's turn the page and sing together. I'm not sure what we're singing.